the evidence locker. This is the crossroads of crime and punishment. Within these walls, thousands of unsolved crimes take the form of evidence kits. And inside each one is the story of a victim waiting for justice. In 1998, Robin Hill is a high school junior.
She was outgoing. She loved to dance, you know. She just loved life.
On a fall evening, Robin and her younger sisters walk home with their mother, Brenda.
And we kind of pipped along because her little sister couldn't walk that well.
Halfway home, Robin runs ahead, and Brenda loses sight of her daughter.
We got to 87th and Michigan. It was dark. I didn't see Robin no more. I'm like, Dad, where'd she go?
When Robin isn't at the house, Brenda sets out to look for her.
When I got halfway down the block, I saw Robin. And Robin was hysterical. And she told me, she said, Mommy, a man assaulted me, and he said he would kill me if I told anybody. I said, well, you know what? You're gonna tell.
In the few minutes that Robin Hill was out of her mother's view, a man grabbed her, took her behind a garage, and sexually assaulted her.
But see, Robin was a virgin. She didn't know nothing about all that, you know. So she didn't know what to do. And he pulled his coat over her head and told her if she hollered or screamed, he would kill her.
Brenda calls the police and rushes Robin to the hospital, where the girl undergoes a rape evidence examination. The evidence is packaged into a kit and turned over to the police. Afterwards, the victim and her family are left to deal with the devastation of rape.
She didn't want to go back to school no more. She didn't want to go outside and play. She didn't want to do nothing. She didn't even want to wear dresses.
Chicago police can find no viable suspects in Robin's case. And the girl's evidence kit is placed in line with hundreds of other cases waiting for DNA testing. And that's where it stays for 6 years.
This is our case file room. Each one of these cases represents a crime. The evidence that's in our crime lab. That evidence eventually makes it to the state crime lab to be processed. And because of all the files and all the cases, as you see, that we have here, we got burdened. The money ran out.
The Chicago Police Department simply didn't have the money to pay for the testing, and the backlog just continued to grow.
The backlog in Chicago when we started this project was 1,200.
Sheri Mecklenburg is Corporation Counsel for the Chicago Police Department.
When we were talking about the backlog, we were talking about what to do about it. And the more that we talked about it, the more that I realized it wasn't a question of technology. It was totally a question of funding.
Mecklenburg decides to enlist influential Chicago women to create the Women's DNA Initiative, also known as WDNA. It's a private foundation established to raise funds for DNA testing of backlogged evidence kits. Police focus on kits that are coming up against Illinois' 10-year statute of limitations on rape. Included in the first 50 kits going to a private lab for testing is the 1998 case of Robin Hill. And after 3 months, the lab has an answer for the police, a full DNA profile of a suspect. Finally, police have a lead in the case. The question now, whose DNA is it? The profile is entered into the CODIS databank, a national system that stores DNA from convicted offenders. And 6 years after Robin's rape, the DNA profile matches up to a suspect. His name is Wayne Willis. Willis's DNA also matches 3 other unsolved Chicago rapes.
Once his DNA profile got put into the CODIS database, he kind of went off like a pinball machine, and he hit to the 4 outstanding cases in Chicago.
Detective Jeffrey Roberts is given the task of tracking down Wayne Willis. He learns that a few months prior, Willis was picked up by Chicago police on a warrant out of North Carolina for 4 sexual assaults there.
At that point, it's a matter of contacting each and every victim and witness that we thought was really critical to the case, establishing a relationship with them.
In July of 2004, detectives locate Robin Hill, 6 years after she was sexually assaulted.
He must have grabbed her and took her back here. This is where he did it at, right here. She called me on the phone. She said, "Mommy, guess what? They caught the man who did that to me." And I'm like, "That's good." She said, "Are you going to be behind me?" I said, "All the way, baby."
Detectives are also able to track down Willis's 3 other Chicago victims.
I found her here at this address.
And each ultimately agrees to prosecute. Wayne Willis is charged with 4 separate counts of aggravated criminal sexual assault.
When I sat down with him, I had all the case files in front of me, and I took them in chronological order by year. I told him, we know there's more victims out there, without a doubt, but we're gonna speak specifically on these because your DNA was extracted from their kits.
Faced with the overwhelming evidence, however, the suspect breaks down and says he wants to talk.
Well, I'll tell you this, when she started crying, which kind of took me by surprise a little bit.
The detective is joined by an assistant state's attorney who takes a written statement from Willis.
Just to briefly read it to you, Wayne states that he remembered the girl in Exhibit 1, which was the photograph he was shown.
Willis goes on to describe his attack on Robin. Wayne Willis gives up the details of each of his 4 Chicago assaults. Detective Roberts believes the apprehension of this serial rapist could not have come soon enough.
If he hadn't have been caught, if his DNA had never been left at scenes, he's never been identified, he would still be out there. And he would still be walking our streets, stalking these women and young girls, a very dangerous sexual predator.
With a confession added to the DNA evidence, detectives believe their case is made. But convicting Wayne Willis will come down to the most important evidence of all, the victim herself. On July 31st, 2006, Wayne Willis is scheduled to stand trial for the 1998 rape of Robin Hill, the first of his 4 Chicago victims. But 6 weeks before the trial date, tragedy strikes the young woman for a second time.
So Robin had a very bad car accident.
Robin is killed in the crash.
I just got stunned because I really wanted her case to move forward. I wanted her to have a chance to have some type of closure.
Without Robin's testimony, prosecutors decide to move forward with their second victim and her case of aggravated sexual assault. On January 5th, 2007, a jury finds Wayne Willis guilty.
Elated that he was found guilty. And I take my hat off to these young women. It took a lot of courage to be able to come forward after all them years and still try to get justice for what happened to them.
3 months later, Willis is sentenced to 33 years in prison. He still faces sentencing on 2 other Chicago rape cases, as well as possible prosecution on 6 additional sexual assault cases in Illinois and North Carolina.
Personally, I don't think he should ever walk the earth again. I think that the same things that drove him to commit the crimes that he committed, if he was out now, he still would be committing those type of offenses. So he should be away forever for what he did.
Much of the credit for bringing this serial predator to justice lies with the Women's DNA Initiative and its founder, Sheri Mecklenburg.
Well, we didn't do it alone by any means. I think it shows that the community and the police working together can solve these problems, because they're really not just law enforcement problems, they're also the public's problems when we have crime. So I think what we showed is that we can work together to solve this, and what it really means is that these problems are not insurmountable.
In its 3 years, WDNA has prompted the funding for the processing of 2,700 rape evidence kits, effectively eliminating Chicago's backlog and finally giving victims justice.